Marinette Hits Her Head, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction written and narrated by Christina. Chapter 4. Ready or Not. Ladybug glanced around, making sure to stay hidden as she slipped down the trapdoor that led to her bedroom and landed on the loft bed below. The Kwami swarmed over to her, exclaiming cheerful praise at her evident success, causing Ladybug to smile shyly, despite having difficulty understanding them all at once. After their voices had died down a bit, Ladybug tilted her head questioningly. So now what? A green Kwami in the shape of a turtle gave her a reassuring smile. Now you go back to living your life as a normal girl. Well, a normal girl with superpowers, that is. Oh. Ladybug climbed down the ladder and walked over to the full-length mirror that stood by her dresser, brushing her hand across the mask that still covered her eyes. But how do I get this off? The Kwamis giggled a bit, while the turtle one explained. That part is easy. All you have to do is say spots off, and Tiki will undo your transformation. Marinette nodded with a confident smile. Okay, spots off. The magical suit faded away, and almost instantly Marinette dropped to her knees as an incredible weight slammed upon her head, and the room seemed to spin in an unsettling fashion. She gave a small cry as she pressed her hands against her head and lowered herself to the ground, trying to fight the nausea churning in her stomach. The Kwamis hovered above her in dismay as they watched their beloved guardian struggle to move. I'm so sorry, Marinette. We should have had you lie down first, the turtle Kwami exclaimed, his voice filled with concern. Marinette gave him a weak smile. It's okay, ways, the turtle supplied. Ways, Marinette repeated, trying to give a short nod, but was overwhelmed by another spell of dizziness. She turned her gaze back to the ground, and as she did, she caught sight of a small red lump curled up by her side. What is... Tiki, oh no, is she okay? Forgetting her weakness for a moment, she reached out her arm and cupped her hands around the small creature, pulling it close to her as the pressure caused her to lay back down on her side. Tiki needs food to be recharged after every transformation, one of the Kwamis explained, while a few of the others quickly brought over a cookie for her to eat. The little red being soon perked up and turned her attention to Marinette. Well done, Marinette. I knew you could do it. Do you think you can make it over to your bed? Marinette glanced reluctantly over at the low chase a few feet away. I think so. After a few agonizing minutes and much encouragement from the Kwamis, Marinette managed to crawl over and pull herself up onto the soft mattress before collapsing wearily against the pillows. Tiki tucked the covers gently up to her chin while Waze motioned for the other Kwamis to give her some space. Get some rest, Marinette. You deserve it, Tiki said softly, though Marinette could barely hear her as her mind slipped away into weary unconsciousness. Marinette! Marinette! The room shook as something landed heavily on the street below, while loud shouts and cries sounded from outside the darkened window, causing Marinette to wake with a start. The Kwamis were scurrying about in a worried panic, while Tiki and Waze stared at her expectantly. Marinette rubbed a sleepy hand against her aching head and glanced around in confusion. But Tiki, what's going on? I thought I defeated the villain already. Usually Shadowmoth only sends one victim a day, but apparently he decided to send everyone at once, said Tiki, her normally patient voice tight with suppressed irritation at the thought of the evil man putting more pressure on her already weak owner. Not everyone, Waze cut in hastily, seeing the look of alarm that flashed across Marinette's face. But you definitely have no time to lose. Marinette hesitated, a feeling of doubt and fear twisting up inside her, but then she quickly hardened her gaze and gave them a determined nod. All right, Tiki, spots on. She felt a reassuring calm wash over her as the suit eased away her pains and filled her with a new strength, then climbed up onto her balcony and readied her yo-yo. The sky was dark as the sun had already set, and she struggled to make out the distant shapes making their way through the city. Ladybug swung herself out into the busy streets, trying to get to a vantage point to survey the chaos, when she rounded a corner and found herself right in the middle of it. Ladybug let out a cry of alarm as a massive blue fist knocked her yo-yo off course, causing her to plummet to the ground. She lay still for a moment, gasping as the wind was knocked from her lungs. Then her eyes widened as the shadow of a large foot loomed over her, and she quickly rolled out of the way just as the foot smashed into the ground where she had just been. Ladybug scrambled to her feet, dodging another swipe from what appeared to be a giant gorilla, when her vision was suddenly clouded by a swarm of feathers, and she felt the thumps and pricks of 100 tiny beaks and heads slamming into her all at once. She swung her yo-yo out to form a protective shield in front of her, swinging it through the creatures until she cleared a path wide enough to pull herself up onto a nearby building. She ducked behind a chimney in an attempt to catch her breath and reassess the situation. The ground beneath her gave way as a cannonball slammed into the rooftop, causing it to collapse into a heap of dust and rubble. Ladybug managed to catch herself just before hitting the ground, then jumped to her feet and took off running, just as a golden cloud of dust settled behind her and a cackling voice called out, "You can't escape me forever, Ladybug." Ladybug fought a shiver at the villain's maniacal laugh, then realized her fear wasn't the only thing making her cold. She stopped short, glancing upwards, and found herself a few steps away from the largest tower of ice cream she'd ever seen, only to realize it was in the form of an angry snowman, whose very presence sent a freezing chill throughout the street. People darted about in a mad frenzy, trying to get to safety while he pelted them from his fists with brightly colored chunks of ice cream. Ladybug gasped as a civilian was struck by one and immediately turned into a frozen statue. She ducked out of the way just as he sent a torrent in her direction, covering her head with her yo-yo to deflect the icy blast while her mind raced to come up with a plan. A bolt of glitter and light hit the ground right beside her feet, jolting her from her thoughts as another stream of golden particles made their way towards her. Ladybug dodged out of the way and shot herself up onto a nearby roof, only to narrowly miss being pelted by cannonballs. It seemed as if all the villains had closed in on her at once, and she was running out of options. Ladybug took off running again, but the villains were close on her heels, and it was getting harder to stay out of their range of fire. She had a vague idea of the city layout, but each turn seemed so unfamiliar to her, and the shadows confused her as to whether a street began or merely a blocked alleyway. As she rounded a corner, she stumbled to a halt as she found herself inches away from an imposing figure with 8 spider-like arms closed tightly into fists. Well, well, the beetle finally had the guts to show up. Too bad that's all that'll be left of her. The spider-like person charged at her head-on, but Ladybug deftly ducked to the side and landed several punches of her own. Ladybug's face was hard and focused as she continued to dance around the oncoming attacks, but inwardly she was beginning to panic. It would only be a matter of minutes before the rest of the villains caught up with her, and she didn't have time to keep playing this game of cat and mouse. Speaking of, where was that partner of hers? Ladybug dodged another blow while struggling to push down the wave of uneasiness that swept through her. She could hear the other villains coming steadily closer, but between the darkness and all the running, she didn't have the slightest idea of where their Akumas might be. Her eyes lit up as a thought came to her. Of course, why didn't I think of it sooner? She somersaulted out of reach from Anansi and exclaimed, "Lucky charm!" Ladybug threw her hand up and watched as a spotted red object fell into her hands. She examined it eagerly, hoping for some sort of weapon or clue, but instead was met with a thick pair of earmuffs. No, what am I supposed to do with this? Her heart seized in her chest as a triumphant shout caught her attention. Ladybug spun around to see 2 gigantic beings encircled by a dazzling cloud of gold rapidly making their way towards her, and she struggled to suppress the shiver of cold and fear that coursed down her spine. A strange cooing sound echoed overhead as a man in a pink suit directed a fleet of pigeons directly towards her. Ladybug's eyes darted desperately as she tried to turn and run the other way, but every step seemed more futile, and she stopped suddenly as a giant spider lady rounded a corner in front of her and started charging in her direction. Ladybug stood frozen in the middle of the street, uncertain of what to do next other than pull out her yo-yo and deflect the blasts of glitter and ice cream that had begun raining down on her. Just as the swarm of pigeons was about to engulf her, a hand grabbed onto hers and began pulling her towards a darkened alleyway. Ladybug felt a slight wave of relief as she recognized the leather-clad figure, and together they used the hoard of feathers for cover, as Cat Noir pulled her towards a separate alleyway she hadn't noticed before. He glanced back at her as they continued to navigate the darkened streets, his hand still secured protectively around hers as he led her down twisted alleyways and out of sight from the villains. "Sorry, m'lady, I was a bit held up. Literally. I thought cats liked to be held," Ladybug quipped, though her voice trembled slightly. "Not when it's by a giant gorilla trying to tear our ears off." "Aha!" he exclaimed, causing him to stop as he knelt down and began unscrewing a metal circle from the ground. "After you, m'lady," he said cheerily, his bright green eyes a stark contrast to the darkness and rotting stench emanating from the hole. Ladybug shriveled her nose in disgust. The sewers? Hey, this was your idea the first time. Got a different one? The ground shook as a cannonball slammed into a building across from them, sending a mass of rubble and dust on the street below. Ladybug gave a sigh and squared his shoulders. No. Cat Noir sent her a sympathetic look as he helped her down the ladder, then replaced the cover of the manhole. They ran a bit further before finally stopping, giving them both a chance to catch their breath. We should be safe here, at least long enough to think of a plan. Ladybug? Cat Noir turned to see Ladybug pacing nervously with her arms crossed and a finger pressed anxiously to her chin. He walked over and placed his hand on her shoulder, causing her to stand still. Hey, I know it looks bad, but we've faced things like this before. I've seen you defeat impossible odds numerous times. If there's anyone who can find a solution, it's you, milady. Ladybug pulled away, shaking her head in despair. I can't do it, Cat Noir. I just can't. I'm not ready for something like this. Maybe I could have done it when I still had my memory, but I'm not that person anymore. The only villain I've ever fought was that metal guy, and I would have forgotten to capture his Akuma if it wasn't for you. Now I'm supposed to face a bunch of villains at once, and I haven't the slightest clue as to how. She blinked back tears and felt her voice straining against the lump rising in her throat. I'm sorry, Cat Noir, but I'm just not capable of being Ladybug. I should renounce my role as guardian and let someone else take my place. No, Ladybug, no, you can't quit. Now you still have a chance of getting your memories back, but if you do that, they'll be gone forever. His voice strengthened as he added, You're the best Ladybug the world has ever seen, and you've proven yourself as guardian over and over again. No one could ever take your place, milady, and no one needs to. She looked up at him doubtfully as he continued, You might not have the same amount of experience, but deep down you're still the same person you've always been. Smart, brave, and willing to step up when people need you. Besides, he added, you still have me, and I have enough experience for the both of us. He winked playfully, then said, We'll get through this like we always do, together. Trust me on this, okay? She stared back into his eyes for a moment, then smiled and replied, Okay. Chapter 5. Game Plan. Ladybug sat perched on an abandoned rooftop, keeping to the shadows as she and Cat Noir surveyed the villains roaming the streets below. She turned to him with a wry smile. So, you're the one with the experience. What would I normally do in a situation like this? Cat Noir thought it over for a moment, then offered, Well, for larger battles like this, you'd normally give out some miraculouses and call on other heroes to help. Of course, Ladybug exclaimed, her face brightening as she began to pull out her yo-yo, but then stopped. What's wrong, milady? It's weird. I can remember facts like the grass is green, where I live, and what each miraculous can do. But when it comes to my personal life or recognizing people, I draw a complete blank. Cat Noir nodded sympathetically. I've heard that's often what happens when someone gets amnesia. Ladybug shook her head in frustration. Yes, but the point is I don't remember who I gave these miraculous to, and I have no idea of who I could trust. Cat Noir's eyes widened in understanding, and he raised his hand to his chin thoughtfully. Well, I know quite a few of them. We could split them up into the ones I know and don't know and see if you have all the ones you need. Ladybug nodded gratefully, and the two knelt down as she carefully laid the miraculouses out on the flattened roof. Cat Noir quickly set to work on sorting out the ones he knew the identities of. Ladybug watched as the pile soon grew into a collection containing the snake, the horse, the dragon, and the pig. Cat Noir hesitated for a moment, then added the turtle and rabbit miraculouses to the pile. Ladybug frowned thoughtfully, then gasped in alarm. Wait, one is missing! What happened to the fox miraculous? They both quickly searched the ground, but it soon became clear that the miraculous of the fox wasn't there. Maybe you didn't have a chance to recover it last time, or maybe you trusted them enough to let them hold on to it? Cat Noir offered uncertainly. Ladybug looked doubtful. Would I really do that? Cat Noir considered it, then replied, Well, probably not the first, but you do seem to have a special bond with its holders, so maybe you decide to give it to her full time. He wasn't sure how he felt about that, but at least the answer seemed to satisfy Ladybug, who had turned her focus back to the rest of the jewels. She reached for the rabbit miraculous and removed it from the pile. Let's not mess with time unless we really have to. Cat Noir looked relieved as he said, "Oh good, I didn't think we were ready to give that Miraculous, but I wanted you to have all the options you needed." Ladybug nodded, then also removed the pig Miraculous, leaving the turtle, snake, horse, and dragon to fight alongside them. "What about this one?" she asked, holding up a yellow comb. "Well, that one is complicated," Cat Noir said as he gathered up the other Miraculouses for Ladybug to put back in her yo-yo. "I do know the identity of the first person who used it, but she kind of hates you now, and I never found out who you replaced her with." Ladybug lifted her eyebrows slightly, but held on to the comb as she handed the 4 remaining Miraculouses to Cat Noir, who slipped them into his pocket and turned to go. He paused and glanced questioningly at the bee Miraculous and asked, "What are you planning for that?" "I need it for my plan to work, and since I don't know who to give it to, I'll wear it myself." Cat Noir faced her with concern. "Lady, no. Combining Miraculous is always dangerous, and in your condition it would be even more so than ever." Ladybug was about to protest when Cat Noir stepped closer and said, "Let me take it. I've combined Miraculous before, and you know you can trust me to get the job done." Ladybug hesitated, then smiled her thanks as she handed the Miraculous to Cat Noir, who swiftly tucked it into his thick hair. "Don't worry, I won't unify them until the battle starts. See you soon, milady." He gave her a reassuring wink before jumping off into the distance. Ladybug turned back to face the growing swarm of pigeons filling the night sky as her mind worked out their coming course of action. Ladybug tried to appear confident as she stared into the unfamiliar faces of the new heroes half circled around her and mentally tried to connect the names with each Miraculous. Snake, Viperian, Horse, Pegasus, Turtle, Carapace, Dragon, Ryuko. Cat Noir gave her an encouraging nod, and she realized they were all waiting for her to speak. She stiffened slightly, then forced herself to relax, and she gave them what she hoped was a confident smile. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. There are too many villains for us to work as a group, so we'll have to split up, but I'm certain you're all up to the task." She hoped it was true, but she had chosen them all before and decided to trust her former decision. They nodded with a hearty support that strengthened her resolve. "Pegasus, you will make a portal to teleport the pirate ship into the ground, trapping it between the surface and the subway station. The ship will still be able to fire, but it won't be able to do much damage from there. Once you've done that, recharge your Kwami, then do the same thing to the gorilla. Ryuko, you will accompany Pegasus and help him fight the akumatized person on board." "Sure thing, Ladybug, but how are we supposed to get there with all these pigeons in the way?" Pegasus asked, shooting her a skeptical look. Ryuko swung her blade with a scoff. "The pigeons are of no concern. The real trouble will be avoiding the falling ice cream scoops. One touch from those and you're frozen solid." Her voice held little emotion, though her eyes glinted with an intensity that was both fearless and thoughtful. Ladybug paced slowly for a moment, knowing they'd raised a valid point. Then her eyes brightened. What if the scoops aren't an obstacle, but rather part of the solution? Change of plans. She turned back to the group and saw she had their full attention. "Ryuko, you will use your wind powers to redirect the ice cream blast onto all the pigeons. That pink guy will be defenseless without his army, and the snowman will probably stop firing once he realizes his own ammunition can be turned against them. There's also a man inside the giant snowman. The wind should be enough to blow off the ice cream and expose him too," Cat Noir offered, and Ladybug nodded appreciatively. "Once you've paralyzed as many as possible, use your power to take out the villain inside." Ryuko nodded in understanding, while Ladybug turned to Pegasus. "Trap the villains same as before, but wait to go near them until Ryuko is able to back you up." "Understood," he nodded, then asked curiously, "But what about their akumas?" "That brings up an important point. Since I can't be everywhere at once, no one is to break an akumatized object until I have a chance to purify them all. Once you've neutralized a villain, bring the object and meet me at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower. Cat Noir, I need you to mobilize the Glitter Queen. Carapace will use his shield to allow you to get close enough. Then once you have the object, recharge your Kwamis and do the same to the Spider Lady." Cat Noir tilted his head as a thought occurred to him. "You know, it's unusual for this many people to be upset at the same time. In the past, Hawkmoth has used a villain called Dark Cupid and given him the power to create negative emotions. He even used it to reakumatize the people we already saved. He might try to do the same today." Ladybug's gaze hardened as she took in this new information, then turned to Viperian and gave him a slight smile. "That's where you come in. Viperian, I need you to keep a distance and look for anything that seems out of place." She turned back to the others. "If anything goes wrong, contact Viperian so he can use his power to go back in time and prevent it from happening. I'll stay in touch with all of you and help out whoever I can." A silent wave of understanding passed through them as they slid out their comm devices and slipped the small pieces into their ears. Ladybug admired the professional confidence they showed, knowing they were probably all just kids like herself, and it felt surreal to have this incredible group of heroes looking to her for direction. She couldn't let them down. Once everyone is in position, Viperion will activate his power, which will give the rest of us only 5 minutes to have the chance for any redos, but I have no doubt you will be able to complete your missions in time. Speaking of 5 minutes, Cat Noir pointed to her earrings and she realized they'd been making a small beeping noise while she explained the plan. Oh, right. Take a minute to think over your strategies while I go recharge my Kwami. Ladybug stepped away from the group and ducked behind a chimney as her transformation wore off. Cat Noir watched Ladybug disappear from view while the other heroes talked quietly amongst themselves. Ryuko was having an intense debate with Pegasus over the odds of a pigeon actually doing someone harm, while Carapace seemed to be trying to lighten the mood. Cat Noir noticed his opportunity and pulled Viperion off to the side. Is something wrong, Cat Noir? Cat Noir hesitated. He knew Luca was a considerate and trustworthy person, but didn't want to give too much away without Ladybug's permission. I need you to help keep an eye on Ladybug for me. Viperion's expression remained a steady calm, though it seemed as if a glint of realization flickered across his eyes, and something clicked in his mind. Cat Noir breathed an inward sigh of relief as Viperion gave a simple nod rather than asking more questions. I understand, Cat Noir. You can count on me. Cat Noir shook his hand in agreement and thanks, then turned his gaze back toward Ladybug, who had reappeared from behind the chimney where she had given Tiki a chance to recharge. A small smile escaped his lips as he watched her stride confidently out of the shadows, a slight breeze causing her dark hair to brush softly against her face, while her eyes sparkled with the tenacious courage and cleverness that flooded him with a warmth and assurance only she could bring. Despite taking precautions, he had no doubt that she was more than capable of handling herself, and he hoped this mission would make it clear to her as well. They reformed their circle around Ladybug as she began giving final instructions for the coming battle. I've been thinking. Instead of trying to rush everything in 5 minutes, once Viperion's time is run out, everyone should retreat to a safe distance and only resume our attacks after Sass has been recharged. That way we can take our time and still have the opportunity to do things over, should something happen unexpectedly. The other heroes expressed their agreement, and after a word from Ladybug, they all sprang out in different directions. Cat Noir moved beside Ladybug and smiled down at her as he gave her shoulder a comforting squeeze. You handled that well, little bug. She let out a slight sigh of relief as if she'd been holding her breath, then sent him an appreciative look before readying her yo-yo and stepping toward the edge of the roof. See you soon, Cat Noir. See you soon, m'lady. They split off as they headed to complete their separate missions, though Cat Noir followed her with his gaze until she had fully disappeared from view. He wished he could have gone with Ladybug and made sure she was safe, but he knew she needed him to take down Style Queen, and he wouldn't let her down. He caught sight of Carapace running along a side street and swiftly landed beside him. The two wordlessly fell into sync as they made their way down to where Style Queen had last been located. Cat Noir shot a glance at his silent companion and wondered if he still harbored feelings of animosity towards him. It was strange to think his school friend Nino had been secretly fighting alongside him all this time. It would have stayed a secret too if he hadn't confided in his best bud, and decided to use his identity as ammunition to fuel his misguided theory about Cat Noir trying to steal his girlfriend. He debated whether he should reveal his knowledge of Carapace's identity to Ladybug when she asked about the Miraculouses, but in the end decided she needed all the options available and figured it was worth the risk. It might be hard to explain later, but he could always come up with an excuse that was too closely connected to his personal life if Ladybug questioned his discovery in the future. He hoped Ladybug would understand and not be too mad when she got her memories back. If she got her memories back. His heart sank just as his ears twitched up at the sound of something hurtling towards them. Dude, watch out! Carapace pulled out his shield, deflecting a blast of glitter before tugging Cat Noir behind a stack of garbage cans to recover. Cat Noir shook himself, refocusing on the task at hand. Thanks. Carapace slapped a friendly hand across his shoulder. I got you, bro. Cat Noir felt himself relax, then poked his head up to take a look at the piles of dust that filled the street before them, and turned to Carapace with a twinkle in his eye. Well, looks like we found her. What do you say we clean up this mess? Chapter 6. Defining Reality. Ladybug dodged another swipe from a massive blue pair of hands as the akumatized being made another attempt to trap her within its grasp. Ladybug had decided it would be best to keep Gorzilla busy and away from the others until Pegasus could send the great beast into a trap of their own, but keeping out of his reach was proving much harder than she initially thought. As she ducked behind a nearby car, she caught sight of a flash of orange darting across a rooftop overlooking the battered street. It appeared to be human except for the pointed ears poking through their hair, and the long coattail made them seem almost animal-like in appearance. Her mind jumped to the missing fox Miraculous, and she wondered if the previous holder had been trusted with it after all. Before she could consider contacting its new ally, Cat Noir's voice broke into her thoughts through the comm link secured in her ear. His voice was calm, but filled with an intense seriousness she had never heard him use before. Viperian, Style Queen caught sight of Carapace and zapped him before he could use his power on me. I need you to go back in time and tell us to approach from the south side instead of the north. South instead of north. Got it. Ladybug felt a wave of shock rush through her at the thought of having lost a team member, but the steadiness in Viperian's voice carried across the radio waves, and she took a deep breath, knowing things would be different next time. For a moment, she wondered what it would feel like to have someone else change time around you, and then Ladybug dodged another swipe as a massive blue pair of hands tried to snatch her into their grasp. Keeping the big gorilla distracted was turning out to be harder than she thought, but she needed to keep it busy until Pegasus had finished taking down the pirate ship. She heard Viperian giving new directions to Carapace and Cat Noir, and felt a shiver slip down her spine as she realized the previous attempt must have ended badly. Ladybug, help me! Her mind snapped back into focus as the sound of a boy's voice calling in distress carried across the abandoned streets. It almost sounded like Cat Noir's voice, but that was impossible since she just heard him on the comm link and he was on the other side of the city with Carapace. She glanced over at the gorilla, who appeared to have tired of his chase and was now making his way up the side of a building. She turned her attention back to the call and cautiously followed it to a darkened alleyway. While she didn't remember much, she did know that a dark alleyway was the perfect place to be ambushed. Ladybug, please. Some rebel fell on me and I got trapped. I need your help. She hesitated, then muttered softly, Lucky Charm. A small cloud of ladybugs circled her hands, and she soon found herself holding the same pair of earmuffs she had been given earlier. Seriously? She exclaimed, forgetting to whisper, but then decided any enemies would have known she was coming anyway. She dutifully slipped them onto her head, trying to ignore the thought of how ridiculous she must look, then strode confidently into the darkness, heading towards the voice. Hello? She called, spinning her yo-yo to the side, keeping it close to her as she stepped carefully through the narrow walkway. She stood still for a moment, waiting for a response, and as she did, she felt the slightest sensation of something brushing against her ear. In an instant, she realized someone was in the process of slipping off her earmuffs in an attempt to steal her Miraculous, and Ladybug swiftly whirled around, swinging her fist at the unseen opponent. The enemy gave a harsh snarl of frustration, but easily dodged her blow before trying to land a few of her own. The attacker made another lunge for her earrings, but Ladybug caught her by the wrists and held her at arm's length as the two struggled and twisted their way back out into the streets. Ladybug's eyes widened as the villain's appearance was revealed in the yellowy lamplight, and she recognized the foxtail pendant hanging from the girl's neck. Surprised to see me again, Ladybug? Volpina sneered while she angrily tried to wrestle out of Ladybug's grasp. Had the fox holder turned against her, just like the former holder of the Bee Miraculous? But no, Cat Noir said she was close to the fox heroine, enough to trust her with her Miraculous. Perhaps this villain was merely imitating her form. The orange-clad villain jerked free from her hold and began leaping up the side of a tall building until she had almost reached the top. Ladybug followed and was about to pull herself up with a yo-yo when the fake heroine ducked out of view, then reappeared dragging a teenage boy by the arm and dangling him dangerously over the edge. The boy's bright green eyes were wide with fright, and the wind ruffled his blonde hair as she continued to swing him back and forth. Stop right there, Ladybug, or you'll never see him again. Ladybug froze, staring at the boy in dismay, her heart beating wildly as her mind raced to think of a way to free him. The boy cried out in alarm as the villain shook him fiercely, his voice matching the one who had so pleadingly called out to her earlier. Okay, just step away from the ledge and we can talk about this. Volpina let out a mocking laugh. I don't think so, but he is getting heavy. The only way for you to save him is if you give me your Miraculous. Ladybug lifted her hands protectively over her ears. Never. A look of surprise flashed across the villain's face. Then her gaze hardened as she said, Fine, have it your way. With a careless flick of her wrist, Volpina let go, and the boy let out a terrified scream that pierced Ladybug's heart. Without a second thought, she jumped from the building and swung her yo-yo out to grab him, only to see his body evaporate the moment she touched it. Angrily, she recoiled her yo-yo and used it to quickly lower herself to the ground. Of course, it was just an illusion, the ability given by the Fox Miraculous, or in this case, the Butterfly Miraculous mimicking its powers. The girl gave a bitter laugh from her perch atop the building, then hurried off in a separate direction, disappearing from view. Ladybug attached the earmuffs to her waist and reached for her comlink. Listen up. There's a girl dressed like a superhero who has the power to create illusions, which apparently dissolve when touched. Do not trust anyone unless you make sure they are actually present. She took one last look at where the girl had been, then began swinging towards the Eiffel Tower to meet the other heroes, noting the sunken ship and gorilla wedged between the street and the subway station with satisfaction. She swung over a man darting about in a pink suit, flapping his arms wildly in distress as he cradled frozen lumps of feathers and arranged them in neat rows across the platform surrounding the Trocadero. She almost felt bad for the strange villain, but knew it had been the fastest way to neutralize both threats, and Ryuko had carried out her job with undoubtable efficiency. Ladybug had almost reached the Eiffel Tower when a dark mass of thunderclouds filled the sky, covering the moon, and she heard a strange sound coming from behind her. She looked back just in time to see the curving arm of an enormous tidal wave rushing towards her, knocking her off course and catching her beneath the merciless waves. She thrashed against the strong pull of the water, struggling desperately to reach the surface, but every time her head broke through, she only had a split second to gasp for air before being pulled back under. The darkness of the night mixed with the blackness of the water made it almost impossible to find her way, as she was tossed to and fro beneath the waves, her throat screaming for air. Just when she thought her lungs might explode, someone grabbed her waist and Ladybug felt them carry her swiftly upwards toward the surface. They burst out of the water, and her rescuer helped her crawl behind a chimney, now almost level with the street, as her body erupted into a fit of violent coughs between chokes and gasps for air. Are you okay, m'lady? She turned to see Cat Noir kneeling beside her, his face lined with concern, though what drew her attention was the toned black suit and bright green fins sticking out from his boots and forearms, and she had to admit it complimented him well. She was thankful for the second fit of coughs that interrupted her thoughts and brought her focus back to the mission. Cat Noir lightly rubbed a hand between her shoulders until she had finished coughing, then turned to her with a serious look in his eye. All the other heroes are camped up on separate buildings not far from here. I was able to get them to safety, and now they're helping people escape their homes and gather on the rooftops, but I'm not sure how many they'll be able to save. Hopefully most people will be smart enough to make it out on their own, but we definitely need a Miraculous Ladybug fix on this one. Shadow Moth has no concept of honor. He finished with a resigned frown, his eyebrows knit closely together. Ladybug understood his frustration over the injustice inflicted on so many innocent people, forced to suffer simply because one man couldn't get what he wants. A loud voice boomed across the city, the echoes of it carrying audibly along the waves. People of Paris. Ladybug and Cat Noir quickly rose to their feet as a bright purple mask seemed to fill the night sky and glinted eerily off the stilling waters. For too long you've allowed Ladybug and Cat Noir to continue this battle against me, dragging you all into a war you never asked for, into a war that threatens your homes, your families, and your very lives. Why allow two mysterious kids to dictate your future? Why allow their fates to become entangled with yours? None of this pain and destruction would have happened if Ladybug and Cat Noir had just given up the miraculouses that don't even belong to them, giving up on their selfish dreams of playing superheroes and handing them over to me. Instead, you are forced to endure hardships day in and day out, never knowing if you are truly safe. You can put an end to all this. Tell Ladybug and Cat Noir to perform their civic duty by handing over their miraculouses and freeing you from this darkness once and for all. Ladybug clenched her fists, seething with justified rage, the pure hypocrisy of it making her blood boil. Without a second thought, she leapt on top of the large dome protruding from the center of the flooded street and turned her hard gaze toward the glowing mask, then relaxed it into a confident smile and instead turned to face the crowds of people gathered on the buildings lining the nearby streets. People of Paris, I know how unfair this is, No one should be forced to leave their homes or live in fear of losing the people you care about. But sometimes things happen that are outside of our control. Evil strikes when you least expect it, and when you're constantly surrounded by darkness, you wonder if it's all you'll ever see. But hope can be found in the shadows, and courage can be found in the storm. We don't have to live in fear. Shadow Moth! She whirled to face him, the purple reflection causing her blue eyes to shine like two sparks in the night. You can make the waters rise and the darkness grow, but in the end, light will always break through. Good will triumph, and no matter how hard you try, you will never get our miraculouses. A loud cheer erupted from the crowds at her words, the waters having amplified her sound. With a sly grin, Ladybug threw a yo-yo high up into the air, higher than she had ever thrown it before. As it reached its full length, the tip of the small handle connected with one of the storm clouds. In an instant, the sky exploded with color, as the darkness dissolved into echoing wisps that faded away, revealing the brilliant yellows and golds of a glorious dawn. A bitter laugh broke through the cheers as a distant voice said, "I'm not done with you yet, Ladybug." The water suddenly disappeared, and in its place stood a strange monkey-like creature. Ladybug made eye contact with it for a split second before it opened its mouth and let out an earth-shattering scream. Parisians dropped to their knees and threw their arms over their heads in a vain attempt to shield themselves from the piercing yet heart-wrenching sound. Ladybug had instinctively pushed the earmuffs onto her head, her lucky charm magic apparently strong enough to keep out the sound. Unfortunately, she couldn't hear any other sounds either. She rushed over to Cat Noir, who was crouching low against the side of a chimney, hands pressed tightly against his sensitive ears while his eyes were squeezed shut, trying to block out the pain. Ladybug tugged on his arm and had to shake him a little before he looked up at her, his face still twisted in an agonized grimace. She immediately moved to give him the earmuffs, but he vigorously refused, shaking his head and pointing to his 2 sets of ears, showing it wouldn't be of much help. Ladybug pointed to his ring and motioned for him to cataclysm it, but he just shook his head and began gesturing wildly before clasping his hands back over his ears. Ladybug wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but understood that using a cataclysm wasn't an option against this opponent. She glanced around and caught sight of Pegasus, curled up on the ground on a rooftop not far from them. She swung over and tapped him on the shoulder, wishing her lucky charm had given her 2 pairs of earmuffs instead of 1. She took a deep breath and quickly shoved the earmuffs onto his ears, nearly falling over from the sudden shock of the agonizing shriek that pounded against her skull and made her body feel like it weighed 1,000 tons. She lowered herself to the ground before trying to signal to him how she needed him to use his power. It took a bit of time to make sure they were on the same page, which felt like forever to Ladybug as her eardrums threatened to split apart. Then suddenly the world went quiet again as Pegasus returned their earmuffs and readied his portal. Ladybug pulled out the beam miraculous she had taken from an unknowing Cat Noir and slipped it into her dark hair. Tiki, Pollen, Unify! It felt strange to be saying words without hearing any sound, but she checked her suit and saw the telltale gold markings, assuring her the transformation was complete. Ladybug dove through the portal and plunged the end of his stinger right into the city monster before locating its amok and silencing the destructive creature for good. After the heroes had a chance to regroup, they turned the captured objects over to Ladybug, who purified the Akumas and then sent her lucky charm back up into the sky, restoring order to the city. Chapter 7. Alone on a Rooftop. I still can't believe you stole the beam miraculous from me, after I specifically told you it was too dangerous, Cat Noir exclaimed with playful offense, but his eyes held a hint of worry. Ladybug rolled her eyes dismissively from her place beside him as they sat on the edge of a roof overlooking the Eiffel Tower. I didn't steal anything, since I am the guardian and I'm the one who decides who gets to wear them. Fine, but it was still dangerous. Why didn't you let me do it? Ladybug noticed a slightly anxious undertone creeping into his voice and dropped her playful carelessness. I'm sorry, Cat Noir. I would have followed your advice, but that city monster came out of nowhere. The earmuffs wouldn't work for you, and I didn't want to force one of the others into taking the risk, so I did it myself. She reached over and squeezed his hand reassuringly. And I'm fine, see? He stared at her, then slowly smiled, and she noticed his shoulders finally relax. Well, you are amazing, Ladybug. If anyone could pull off something like that with a head injury, it's you. She shrugged her shoulders but felt her cheeks warm from his praise and quickly tried to casually redirect the subject. So, what was with the new suit? Cat Noir wriggled his eyebrows teasingly. Why? Did it catch your attention? Ladybug nearly choked at his boldness and was sure her cheeks had turned as red as her suit, but hoped he wouldn't notice due to the fact she'd given him a hearty shove in the ribs that nearly sent him tumbling over the edge, and after a moment the two burst out laughing. Okay, I deserve that, but you gotta admit, I look pretty good as a catfish, no? That's debatable, she replied, giving his bill a small flick and taking a smug satisfaction in the stunned look on his face, which was soon replaced by a wide smile. Wow, m'lady, I forgot you could be so much fun. Ladybug groaned. Ouch, Cat Noir, that was painful even for you. Now you have to make up for it by telling me everything about how you changed your powers. Cat Noir grinned sheepishly. Yeah, that one was pretty bad. What can I say? You baited me with your clever bait pun, and my mind still has to recover. The power suit. Now, Cat Noir. Okay. Master Fu gave you special recipes to give us power-ups, enabling us to fight in different elements. But you only made some for the two of us, which is why the others weren't able to transform like I did. Master Fu? A sorrowful look grew in Cat Noir's eyes, making her wish she hadn't asked. He was the old guardian, and seemed to be a good friend of yours. Oh, I hope you won't be offended when I don't recognize him. Cat Noir gave her a half-smile. Well, he actually lost his memory too. That's what happens when you renounce being guardian. So you could both get to know each other all over again. Ladybug tilted her head thoughtfully. Why did he renounce being guardian? Cat Noir hesitated, his thoughts wandering as the wide blue eyes stared up innocently into his own. As crazy as this past day had been, and as much as he worried for her, Ladybug without her memories had been just as successful as always, and almost seemed happier. Freed from the weight of guilt and stress, she was able to simply be herself, to joke and laugh without worrying about messing up the world. Was it selfish to want to preserve this? Was he doing it for her or for him? Ladybug would get her memories back, he decided, and when she did, all the knowledge and wounds of the past would come rushing over her like a tidal wave, pulling her back to the tension and fear he knew she struggled with on her own. But for now, he would wait, tell her what she needed to know and leave out the parts she didn't. Sooner or later, she'd probably figure it out anyway, but until then, he would protect her from those burdens as long as possible. He was really old when it happened, and knew he'd found the perfect replacement. Besides, once he was free from his duty, he was able to go be with his one true love, and now they're happily settled in a beautiful house, and will probably come to visit sometime. Ladybug smiled a bit. I'm glad he has a chance to live a happy life after all the struggles he must have been through. Cat Noir glanced up at the sun peeking over the rooftops. Yeah, me too. They sat quietly for a moment. Then Ladybug said, There's one thing I don't get, though. If Shadowmoth can akumatize so many people at once, why doesn't he do that all the time? Cat Noir nodded thoughtfully. I've wondered about that quite a bit myself. Maybe because it's harder for him to focus on so many at once, and it's more likely for them to make mistakes. But really, I think it's a pride thing, he added, while Ladybug shot him a confused look. You see, if there's only one akumatized person, he can pin all the blame on them. When he creates a whole army of them, he's no excuse for losing, except that we're better than he is, Cat Noir explained, sending her a playful wink before growing more serious. Also, with that many villains, he ends up attacking the whole city, and he always tries to turn them against you. But then you turn around and point them right back at him. He took his gaze off the sky and stared earnestly into her eyes. You've always stood up for others, and the way you stand your ground and hold on to a confident, positive outlook is an inspiration to everyone. You really are amazing. And I mean, the way you tossed up your yo-yo and made the clouds disappear as if you'd summoned the dawn itself? How'd you know it was just an illusion and not some other villain's power? Ladybug smiled slightly. I had a feeling Shadowmoth would be the kind of person to use the power of illusion just for the aesthetic. Cat Noir nodded, trying to keep a straight face, then gave up as he felt an uncontrollable well of laughter bubble up inside of him. And Ladybug soon joined him as they both pictured the sour-faced evil man wasting valuable resources, simply to give himself a spooky vibe. The streets had begun to come alive below them, and Cat Noir knew he'd be expected to wake up and get ready for school soon, though he wished this night didn't have to end. He stole a glance at Ladybug, who was still wiping a joyful tear from her eye, and he made a mental note to treasure this moment forever. After all this time, all the secrets and betrayals and lies, it was just the two of them again, sitting on a rooftop, together against the world. Hope you enjoyed. A bit longer than usual, but thanks for taking the time to read through it. Thank you also for your patience, as I know it took me quite a bit of time to get the second part out. However, I do have most of the third part ready, so that should come out soon. And I have to admit, it is probably one of my favorite parts in this story, as it's what inspired me to write this story in the first place, aside from a concussion I experienced. Actually, that's one thing I love about Marinette, is that finally there's a character you can relate to if you're super clumsy, which I am. But yes, actually this particular time it wasn't my fault, I'll have you know. Anyway, I won't tell you what it's about, but you may notice I'm trying to somewhat recreate or reimagine classic scenes with a spin on it of Ladybug having lost her memory. So it's definitely something you should recognize. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a great day.